Hello, everyone. On behalf of VentureBlick and all of our speakers and panelists today, please allow me to welcome you to the first edition of our Discovery webinar. Now, this webinar is being live streamed by our partner VCBit in China, and the recording will also be published after the webinar is over. So at this point, 让我在这里向来自中国的观众致以热烈的欢迎。My name is Jamie, by the way, and I'm here at VentureBlick to help out with investor relations and content. We are, of course, here to answer a fundamental question. Is going global a necessity or a privilege for healthcare startups? You should see on your screen right now a poll, and we want to really hear your thoughts about this, and we're going to do a poll that's similar to this right at the end of this webinar to find out whether your thoughts have changed or not. Now, to help us answer this question, we have also assembled perspectives from various players in the healthcare industry, whom you will hear from later. Before that, though, please allow me to welcome my boss, Chris Lee, founder and CEO of VentureBlick, to kick things off with his opening address. Over to you, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Today's topic is a really interesting one. Before we invite our speakers, let me quickly introduce VentureBlick. At VentureBlick, we are all about healthcare innovations go global. What do we mean actually by this? The reality is that healthcare is really complex and only the big guys seem to benefit because smaller players do not have the global visibilities, resources, and network needed to compete on a global stage or on a global scale. This is why we built a platform called Discovery, which was played a minute ago to give you a glimpse of it, where all the key players in healthcare innovation globally can connect and everyone can benefit more with better collaboration. With a platform like Discovery, where we gather all the insights and happenings with the healthcare ecosystem around the world, it puts us in an ideal place to convert these insights into effective global solutions. Whatever solutions that we provide is backed by the leverage of our global Discovery platform. So if you are a healthcare company looking for real insight from advisors from all over the world, we can reach them for you. Or if you are a healthcare hospital looking for technology in a specific specialty area, we can run a tech scouting program for you. Or if you are a healthcare innovator looking to commercialize your innovation, we can also help you with your go-to-market plans. If you are a government agency supporting startups, we can also help you with your incubation or acceleration program specific to healthcare need of your own market. So just to give you a snapshot of our global presence at this point in time, which is growing by the day, physical presence in 5 locations, meaning we have a full-time employees in these 5 locations covering pretty much the world: Singapore, Korea, Germany, India, and China. And we run events engaging the local ecosystems in those locations too, as you can see from the pictures that are shown on the screen. And we do have a global network of healthcare experts and advisors. As of today, 3,000 plus and counting, and it's increasing day by day. Both clinician and industry experts from 60 countries covering 30 plus specialty areas, who we relying on for real-world insights. Over the past almost 2 years, we have been building our partner and investors networks as well. So we will continue to do so. Before I hand back the time to Jamie, I'd like to encourage any innovators out there to apply for our Super Innovator Search, which is deadline by August 6th. And thank you again for everyone joining us today for our first webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Now, let's move into the topic proper, beginning with a sharing by John Joseph Christophe, CEO of Cassis. That's a startup that's based in France, developing cardiovascular image analysis software. And I'm sure he has some pretty interesting insights to share about moving and expanding overseas. Over to you, John Joseph.
Hello, bonjour, namaste, guten tag, ni hao, konnichiwa. So I'm going to address the topic of is going global a necessity or a privilege for a healthcare startup by sharing with you the example of my company, Cassis, for which I'm the CEO and founder. Company specialized in cardiovascular imaging. and based in France. So our mission is to provide effective cardiology with AI solution. And our vision is about providing access to care through technology. Cardiovascular disease are the leading cause of death globally. And among the main issues, in order to establish a proper diagnosis, the physician needs a huge amount of information from different sources, which requires clinical experts from a different type of expertise, which, consequently, required different physicians, and the consequence is a high cost and long decision time. So, as you might understand, in order to make the decision more efficient, it is necessary to rely on AI, and which explain a very fast-growing market. So, in this market, Cassis is at all the different steps of the value chain for the post-processing of cardiovascular MR and CT images. In particular, for the next version of our solution, which analyzes those MR and CT images and provides parameters and figures in order to support the clinician decision, we will have the first zero-click solution for the world, meaning that it will be possible for the physician to have the software on its own, able to detect when an examination arrives in the several called packs, launch the automatic analysis of the images, provide automatically the report, and resend the results in the server of the hospital. So let's move on to the topic of today: why going global? There is two types, of course, of healthcare startup, B2C and B2B, if we look at the customer that we might have. If we think about B2C, then we need first to convince the patients. And meaning that the market is going to be very, very sensitive to local habits, customs, and culture. And consequently, we will have to face a high fit-to-market cost to move from a local area to broader market. While in B2B, the question is quite different, because we can be in a market for which the usage are quite standardized, meaning that the fit-to-market cost to go global are going to be more limited. There is another point that when you are B2B, you might be in a kind of a small market locally, which push you to go global. This is the case actually for Cassis. We are B2B. We have only a few hundreds of potential customers in France. So for us, it has been a necessity to go global. Cassis has been founded in 2016. We are around 30 collaborators, and we have the regulatory clearance for EU, US, Japan, Brazil, and Taiwan. And as you can see here, we are from the beginning a quite international company. Regarding the management team, the founders are obviously from Burgundy, as the company is a spin-off of the Dijon University Hospital. So it's about Thomas and Alain, the inventor of the project. Myself, I got 2 PhDs, so a French one, but a Japanese one. I'm fluent in Japanese. Guillaume, the head of regulatory, is based in the US citizen based in Portland. And Nathan, the VP of sales, is based in Seattle, and all the time is between US, Germany, and China. Our team is with more than half of the team are foreigners, and more than 8 different languages are spoken. And as you can see here, we also rely on an international scientific committee from every continent. So other point that can motivate to move on from a local market to a global market. One thing is the clinical point of view, as we are talking about healthcare companies. So from a pathology point of view, I can give for Cassis the example of cardiac sarcoidosis. It's widely studied in Japan, not so much in France. And recently, French cardiologists realized that what they thought is not cardiac sarcoidosis is actually cardiac sarcoidosis. Another example is about myocarditis, which is a well-known disease. In France, we usually don't do biopsies, while in Japan, half of the patients go for a biopsy. Another point to keep in mind is about AI data, because it's quite easy when you are a spin-off of a hospital to use data from this hospital and to publish a nice paper showing a very high accuracy with, relying on the data of your hospital. But once your algorithm is going to be tested in the real world in other hospitals, and especially in different countries, then you will have to face more likely very lower accuracy. So that's why I think it makes sense to try to have, it's not only a point of view of the market, but global collaborations from a research point of view. So if you want to go global, first you need to understand your market. And I want to share with you the fact that for France, we have established a partnership with the all procurement body and the French Society of Cardiovascular Imaging. Going from that, let's have a look at two examples, Japan and China. So in Japan, we have established a strong partnership with Civic, which is doing 10% of all cardiac MR in Japan. Tokyo University Hospital, which is a reference center for cardiovascular imaging in Japan. We have local distributors, and we have a strong relationship with local branch of manufacturers such as Siemens. In China, we are distributed by the Chinese branch of a French company, Ultrasense, and also we have a partnership with a Chinese manufacturer, Huawei Medical. I could give the example also of the Latin American market, where we have a strong relationship with a local branch of GE. And we are working with an Indian company for AI cloud company, which is also quite strong in Brazil. One of the companies, Capolea. So now let's have a look at the challenges that we might have to face as a startup company going global in the healthcare industry. First, we need to find local partners. And if we go for a small company, they might not have any real understanding of what we are doing. If we go for bigger companies, the issue is we might end up being just one product among many in their catalogs. So from that point of view, I think there is 2 points that we need to keep in mind. Make sure that regardless of the size of the distributor, they are going to allocate time and resource for us. And the second point is we need to keep in mind that on our side, because nobody is going to understand better than us our product, we need also to spend time to train and explain our product to our partners. Second point is, of course, it's really good to have partnership with manufacturers. I mean, in our case, with manufacturers of MR machine, for instance. But it's quite difficult. It takes a lot of time. Those companies are not moving on really fast. So, meaning that we need to be patient. We need to attend a lot of events that might not be that relevant for us, but in which we are going to meet them, which means that we are going to invest time and money. The other thing is, in order to convince either manufacturers, small or bigger local partners, we need to bring with us local KOL. And for that, if we don't know them beforehand, we are going to we need to go to international events as well, and we need to convince this KOL of the interest for them to support us. So this is again cost and money and time. And next point is about the fact that once you have all that, you need to make sure that if you already have the local clearance, or if you need a specific clearance from the medical device point of view. So this is again cost and money. And lastly, of course, you need to make sure that your solution is protected from an IP point of view. And to finish, I would like to share with you a global testimonial for a global healthcare startup.
Thank you, John Joseph. Now, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to just point out the Q&A function of this webinar, which you can access via the panel at the bottom of the screen. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have over there, whether to John Joseph or to our panelists. With this, we're going to move on to our panel discussion. I'm going to hand the time over to Shavari, our South Asia Startup Relations Lead, who will moderate the panel discussion. Shavari, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I hope everyone can hear me well. It's a pleasure to have such a diverse panel today. We have representatives from multiple nations as well as playing very different roles in the healthcare industry. So from India, we have Priyank. He's a founding partner of Photon Legal, and he understands all things IP, legal, incorporation in various countries. We have Dr. Hans. You can say a quick hi. He's a senior expert with BPI. He's joining us from Germany today. Both of them are industry advisors on the VentureBlick advisory. As a part of our medical advisory, we have Dr. Andrew. He's an associate consultant at KK Women's and Children's Hospital in Singapore. And we also have Michael Blakey, who's joining us as an investor today. He's the managing partner for Cocoon Capital and also based in Singapore. As Jamie introduced, I'm Dr. Sharvari Sathe. I handle startup relations for VentureBlick in South Asia. So without further ado, I'm going to just fire questions at these panelists. No, I'm kidding. Today, I would like to take this discussion more as a debate because I do feel that there is a gray area here. We've had 2 out of 3 of you already thinking that it's a necessity to go global, but would love to hear from the panelists different aspects of going global and what do they consider when they're talking to innovators about this. I'd like to pose my first question to Dr. Hans. You have a lot of experience working in the German market. And I would say, besides why do you want to enter, what would be your first 1 or 2 questions for a startup who would want to enter the German market?
Thank you, Shavari, for this question. It's very important. And also thank you to Jean-Joseph, because he really described it very well, what matters, not only in France, but also in Germany. And the 2 questions you were asking is, are you really familiar with the German healthcare system? So do you know about access opportunities? Do you know the payer situation? And for me, number 1 is the patient journey. So what is the product? Is it more a retail market? Is it a hospital market, direct to consumer? I think that's important that you ask this when you want to come to Germany. Number 2 question would be, how do you ensure adequate budgeting and data generation? It's so important to understand that you have to provide local data if you want to be successful in the German market. These are the 2 questions I would like to address first.
That's very relevant points. And I think that would be a bit more similar to the kind of questions that I imagine Priyank asking some of his clients as well. I mean, there are so many founders in India that consider the United States to be a lucrative market. They consider that they would get better margins for their products or services there. At which point do you actually consider a startup to be ready to make this journey? What is the hardest step in this process? Is it IP? Is it regulation? Is it legal conditions? What are your views?
Wow, a great question, Dr. Sharvari. Thank you so much for having me. Great to share the panel with the esteemed panelists. So the question on when to launch the company in the US is being even asked in the chat as well. When do we get to know when the company is ready to launch outside India? Specifically talking about US is one of the mature market in the world right now. When it comes to access to capital, when it comes to IP protection, the seriousness in terms of venture funds. And because of that, US is a favorite choice for not just Indian startups, but startups across the globe. One of the best advantage which US gives is, of course, access to funds. And you can do a lot of testing in the US. But the rate limiting factor, I would say, or one of the major hurdle for anybody in the US to launch and start doing the business would, of course, be the legal hurdles. you must get your product market fit right and also get your FDA's approvals and all the regulatory things sorted. Then only you will be able to enjoy the benefit of your technology in the US. And also, I would also encourage people to find out a collaboration partner in the countries like US when they're launching anything from India or any other countries, because that helps you to understand local market as well. US dynamics are pretty different. John very wonderfully explained in his presentation as well. When they did research on Japanese patients versus the patients in the France, the data was different. So even though you are using technology which is internet based, for example, today everybody's talking about AI in healthcare. You want to launch the same thing in the US, you can very well go ahead and do that. But the data would be different in the US, the results would be different in the US, and the same thing holds true when people want to come to India as well. So I would strongly suggest that the best thing to assess is your product market fit, access to capital, access to your network, because they will fundamentally be helping you out in reaching out to different people, unlocking opportunities for you. Do not forget about networking. When you're getting into the US, you would find a lot of similar people helping out to you, reaching out to you, and yeah, your investors, they would be taking you to the places. And if your regulatory is sorted, then sky's the limit for you.
Thanks for answering, Prayak. I think on that note, I would actually like to come back a little more to the discussion about CASIS, because you touched on a point there. I mean, there's a very clear match between what CASIS is doing and Dr. Andrews' expertise in cardiology. And there's a very valid point, which is that the biology of the patient matters, right? Depending on where you're going. And there's so much AI available right now, especially in the healthcare ecosystem, assisting doctors in their decision-making. Assuming there is a good match between the data set that the founder has used and the tech is, solid, what would your other concerns be while adopting an AI product in your practice?
I think there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of hype over AI technology right now. And the fact of the matter is you really have to look at AI as a product of the data that you feed it. So whether or not it's good quality data, whether it's homogeneous, whether it's labeled properly, all of those are factors you have to account for. And there are factors outside of the AI that you would need to account for. So for example, let's take diabetes as an example. There are numerous softwares available in the US, like Curves, that can take a photo of your food and estimate things like its caloric count. And so if you take a picture of a salad, you can imagine the same salad that I purchased from Salad Stop here in Singapore will probably give you same results. But what happens if I apply that data to a plate of curry and prata? What happens if I take that and I take fishball noodles? What happens if I use that on a bowl of rice? Immediately, you'll realize that a lot of this data, that data that you've trained that is very excellent and robust and useful in other locations and has been trained on specific data is no longer relevant here. And that's just looking at the data itself. You're not even accounting for the fact that fundamentally speaking, different populations, different ethnicities, even different socioeconomic groups have different manifestations of disease. The same people in Singapore who have diabetes with an HbA1c of 8 look very, very different than the ones in Europe, the ones in Africa, or the ones in the US. And you cannot wholesale take whatever works there, plop it down in Singapore or Indonesia or Thailand, since many startups like to look at ASEAN as one big country. You can't do that, not just because it doesn't make sense from a data perspective, but it doesn't make sense from a clinical perspective either. And that's just from the medical side. From the logistics side, you have so many other concerns because AI technology is increasingly being seen as very attractive for helping us accelerate our care and cut down on things like administrative tasks and time to diagnosis. But they're also being faced with increasing regulations. You need to, just to deploy an AI model here in Singapore, you need to meet HSA standards for medical AI as a medical device to see how invasive it is, what sort of level of therapeutic decision does it provide. It needs to be validated. You need to have a QMS in place. You need to have continuous review and monitoring. And you also need to prove financial sustainability and calculate cost per model. And that doesn't even account for the biggest blockade, which is integration with the existing healthcare systems. Because any doctor will tell you they don't want to download a new app. They don't want to have a new software that they have to click on and then copy paste into something else into the system. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And that's something that many people don't recognize, that integration with an EMR or a CMS is going to be time consuming and costly. And oftentimes it may or may not be worth the effort. So I think it's great that we have all this interest in AI in healthcare. You really have to look at the reality of the situation, which is you need a clinical product market fit. You need to make sure the data is validated. It needs to meet regulatory and safety and privacy standards. And then you need to consider the integration. And with startups, you have limited capital. You have very short timelines. Globalization may be a necessity, but oftentimes you have to pick and choose exactly where you want to expand, what your goals are with expansion, and how best to deploy your capital in that way. And I tell that to all the companies that come to speak to me. They need to be very smart about where they're going and why. In which case, yes, the US is a huge market. It's a great market. Yes, going for CE mark by expanding to the UK is great. But have you considered trying Korea, trying to expand to India first, trying to get a market share there, get some capital, get regulatory approval in XYZ, get funding from here, and then using that as a stepping stone to the next one. Don't just go straight to the largest market and just say, oh, this is the biggest market. Numerically, it makes sense. It's not just about the numbers.
Very, very valid points there. I mean, it's much beyond providing medical value or clinical value. It's about providing value to the doctor's time as well. Their patients, they would rather reserve their patients with the tech that they would need to learn and adopt. So coming back to your point about founders in India, I think my next question would be for Michael. You recently visited Chennai and you engage with founders here. What are the challenges that you face when you consider investing in startups outside of Singapore?
I think for me, it's when we're looking at companies, it's understanding the different regulatory requirements. Culturally, it is very different. And, going to the question of, am I worried when companies start talking about going global? I kind of going on to the points that have kind of already been put on. For me, I need a company to be going global. For a venture capital, if you've got to understand from a VC perspective, we are looking for companies that are going to give us outsized returns. So they've got to be going after a much larger market than for most people have in their own market. But the reason, what concerns me sometimes is if people say we're just going to go global, and there's not a plan of a kind of a clear necessity in terms of who their competitors are. Because, one of the things everybody's talked about is like going to the US. The problem is, if you're going into the US market, is there's always probably better funded competitors in the market than you, and they're on their home turf. So culturally, they're better. And also their founders are there. They have normally the networks that you don't. So quite often what I talk about, and I think Dr. Andrew said this very well, is look at other markets that you can go after, which might not have that same, will have always the same need, but might not have the competitors that is required. And we look at it in terms of like the cost of acquisition. Sorry, as an investor, everybody else has talked more about on the medical side. I've got to talk about the money side of it.
That's exactly why we have you here.
So we look at what is the cost of acquisition, who are your competitors that you're going after. The great thing about US companies is they go global, but they never actually leave the US. So they talk about, because it's such a big market. So quite often they leave the rest of the market and they do a lot of the education of the market for you. So, and what they normally produce is over-engineered for a lot of more developing markets, because the level they've got to actually deliver to. So quite often, if I'm talking to my Indian founders, I'm like, well, go after other undeveloped markets. The regulatory is less, the competition is less, and you don't have to have the finished product. It's fine to say maybe 5, 6, 7 years you go after the US market. but start off in a market that you can go after, which is much more forgiving. And a lot of, we talk about FTA, but the reality is the US market is very litigious. So you can get caught up very easily in things, and people are very fearful of doing anything unless they've got everything approval, or kind of all the clinical trials done and everything. It's actually easier to start off in other markets, build the data to actually have better results with your product, and then go in the US market later. And also you've got to look at how you're expanding into these markets. Like very few companies go after these markets doing direct sales. I've got a number of kind of medtech companies within my portfolio. So when you talk about going global, it's like, how are you thinking? Is it through partnerships? Then it's, who are the right partners? Who are the ones that have already got those relationships? And too many founders feel that they've got to do it themselves. And when you talk about partnerships, they have very little understanding of actually what a partnership looks like, and where the power, like people, oh yes, they've got, I'm about to do a partnership with X, and they have access to like 50,000 clinics around the world. And I'm like, yeah, but actually that's not probably a good partner for you, because you're one, they're selling, 100 different things to these, and you're just one small part. They're looking to use you to cover maybe other ones, where other products which actually get the higher kind of return for them. So sometimes going after different partnerships, maybe smaller partners, are not ones that you're working with. Or, as I think Dr. Andrew said, is if you're going into hospitals, if you're selling a product, it's got to be able to link with other products. It's not a standalone. So do you actually partner with the ERM systems or whoever else is out there that already have that, and that for them there's an added benefit to it? So I think, kind of going back to your questions, when I'm talking to founders and I'm saying, what is the right market to go to? Understand there's a cultural, there's a level, there's a competitor market, and then figure out how you actually expand those into those markets. And more often than not, it is through partnerships than it is through direct sales. And a lot of founders come to that realization way too late.
Absolutely agree. I mean, I think the point you made there about finding someone who is at a similar level as you, I think that's quite relevant. And sometimes founders, in their ambitions, choose to go with the biggest players, but they might get crowded out, like you said. It becomes very difficult to stand out even to the partner who has a portfolio of partners themselves. You don't want to be just one more logo on their website. You actually want to be doing business with them. And that's my takeaway from what you said, Michael. And you also touched upon, the duration at which a company should consider going global. You typically work with early stage companies. Is showing going global on the 5-year mark, is that something that makes you ecstatic, or something that you feel a bit more nervous about?
So at Cocoon, we're a pre-seed seed fund. So the majority of the companies that we're investing in are not just pre-revenue, they're pre-product. So quite often they're raising money from us to go and get FDA approval or whatever it is, and maybe get their first one or two customers in a kind of a 2-year period. What I really focus more on is, what is the problem that they're solving, and is it an important enough problem that actually needs to be solved? In terms of it, and then in the medical world, it's one of the reasons I love medtech is that if it's a problem in one country, it's probably a problem in every country. So how important it is and how you sell it might be slightly different, but it's about pacing yourself. So if a company told me that I was looking at that going global in 5 years, I would probably panic, because that would be way too fast. What I would like to see more is an understanding of the problem, the opportunity, and a clear vision in terms of how they're going to get to kind of level 2 or level 3. So go beyond their home market and maybe go as a regional play, or it could just be we're going after more the developing markets and the developed, but have a clear understanding of who actually their customers are, and then who the low-hanging fruit is. Because as I said, quite often going after the big boys, just because their higher margins or the US market isn't actually, quite often they're the much longer sales cycle. So if you can demonstrate to me a commercial plan that actually makes sense, that's actually much more interesting to me, because the problem is I have a lot with medtech companies and the founders is product, they know everything, but sometimes they don't really know how to actually take what they're building and actually commercialize it. And I think that's why a lot of companies fail, and also where a lot of investors turn them down is because they're like, we get it, we understand it, but you have absolutely no idea in terms of talking about pricing, whatever. And even though investors say they're really supportive and active, they really kind of want the founders to do it. They don't want to be having to handhold them.
Thank you so much, Michael, for those wise words. It's a balance doing the business yourself and partnership, knowing your own tech and selling your own tech. So I completely agree that in some areas, the founders need to understand their own strengths and play along with that. Talk to people who would be more supportive and not just big brands. That makes a big difference while going global. And I think that's a hurdle while going global, because it's hard to know whether a brand exists or not. If it's a medium-sized company, you would typically start by Googling something, and it's going to be the larger companies that show up first. So it's definitely a challenge. I do have some questions coming in from the audience. So there's one here from Keith Chong. He says, in Singapore, no one investor will say there is enough market size here for any business. India, on the other hand, has large market size. Is the motivation going global different for different countries?
I can answer that. So is the motivation for different countries different for going global? The answer to that question is perhaps yes, because every country has a different challenge, and even every solution is getting to different kind of audience as well. If you look at India as a market, I would say India and China both, we have a population of more than 1 billion. That clearly means the opportunity is huge when it comes to any consumer-oriented product or any idea or any solution you wish to launch in these two countries. Even people in the West, they are looking at from the Eastern side of things from a different perspective nowadays, because we have access to technology, we have access to people. In terms of user base, we are the largest one, India and China combined together. Even the Southeast Asian market, if you put together, it's more than the market in the West. So right now, people and the companies, even the investors in the health tech domain or any consumer-centric domain, they are looking towards East and perhaps looking to expand their businesses because of the opportunity which it presents. I also like to touch upon what Michael said, that it's very important to identify which countries you wish to expand to by just not expanding to the US for the sake of expanding it. And that's something which I also suggest to almost all of our clients from the technology domain when they say we want to file a patent and we want to just file a patent across the globe. And filing an IP globally is not a thing. You have to identify the markets where you actually want to launch. And I have 2-point rule while recommending where to go next. Do you have a competition in that market, or do you see a potential market opportunity in that particular jurisdiction or the country? These are the 2 points which I ask strongly to any founders to evaluate before making a decision to go global. So Michael also touched upon this point, saying that if there is no competition in other markets like Korea, Southeast Asia, then why don't you explore that? Build your product there, build your use case there, because in terms of user base, you will have much larger sample set to test, to get your things validated, and then use that successful case study and go for the approvals, go for the launchings in the other market. US is a saturated market, while the Eastern market are much more open, providing you much more opportunities. So I think whoever has asked this question, a fantastic question, I would say. Different products, different solutions for different countries do have different market as a global concept. Going global doesn't just mean going to the US.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that fad is not relevant as of now. Going global means certainly coming to India, China, and even Africa for that matter. Less regulatory approval, lot more challenges in terms of healthcare services solutions, and more acceptability. One thing which people also often do not consider is government support. Some of the health tech clients we have been advising, they are also working very closely with governments in the Europe, UK region, governments in the UK, in the Africa, where the governments are inviting technology companies to work and get their products and solution tested in at the local level. So I think partnerships like that and the support like that, if you are getting from the external countries, then I'm sure those are the better markets for you to try, because someone else is taking that effort for you to get your technologies tested in that market. And once you test it out and you have the confidence, then by all means get your investors to launch you in the US with big fat checks as well, because it's going to require a lot of money to sustain in the US market.
Yeah, I would like to add something on that, because it's very important to understand that sometimes a regulated market and government support, as just mentioned and detailed, might be not only a hurdle, but could be also an opportunity. And especially when you take, for example, it's not the number of patients that matters, it's the number of patients you can reach. For example, it's rather easy to do clinical trials in Eastern Europe, but it is at the end of the day, when you get market authorization and you get in Europe with the EMA is as good as FDA, but has sometimes a different approach on the clinical data. But you have the problem that a lot of these expensive drugs like biologics will not be available even when they are registered in Europe to some Eastern countries. For example, in dermatology, you can do very nice trials in psoriasis in Poland, but you will not be able to sell it at the end of the day, because the reimbursement doesn't take place. In Germany, you have the situation that you really can also, when you have achieved authorization, you have done your health technology assessment, you will get a perfect reimbursement by the healthcare system. And then it doesn't matter how expensive the product is, you have a reliable market, because this is something that is in a very structured healthcare system, the way it goes. And it's different country by country. This was already discussed. The launch sequence is a strategic point. The launch readiness is another point. And for example, in UK, the NICE was only done to really be able to work with limited resources. In other markets, like in Germany, this AMNOG system was launched also to cut costs and to put a cap on pricing. But at the end of the day, it didn't prevent that innovation is able to get through if you really provide the right data and you have the right value dossier. So it is really something I would like to add to the discussion we just had, that it is very important that you not only focus on the US market, but you really look for your product. Is it a diagnostic? Is it a drug? Is it a device? Or is it data? Then you check the countries that perhaps might be suitable to launch, and then you go global. But you have to take your time.
It's a question about the global and domestic markets differing on multiple aspects. One of the points mentioned here, in addition to demand and regulations, is the budget. What are the considerations when it comes to a budget if I'm looking to sell something to a hospital?
Okay. So I think you have to recognize that in the healthcare space, there's a very complex stakeholders ecosystem. And although the physicians and the healthcare providers are oftentimes decision makers, they are usually only influencers in the space of actually making procurement decisions. So for example, if I work for a large healthcare system, a hospital group or anything like that, at the end of the day, I can get some say in let's say tomorrow I'm doing a meniscus surgery and I want certain suture anchors, and I say I want Arthrex, I want Smith and Nephew, and I want some third company. I can put in those inputs, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be the hospital group that decides which ones they will choose to stock and which one will be available for me to operate on. So it's important to recognize who is an influencer and who gets to make a decision at the end of the day. The research actually shows that I think McKinsey released a huge report in 2010 that showed that doctors have a very poor sense of quality and markets. You bring up things like ISO certification, FDA certification. You tell a doctor you have 510K approval and you have IP protection across the world. So what? That doesn't mean anything to me. What does influence my choice of a meniscus suture anchor or the button I use for an ACL reconstruction or which brand of scopes I do? Oftentimes it's it's my own clinical experience. It's what I used when I was training. What other people around the globe have been publishing, and what the things like vendor relations are the best. There is some correlation in terms of things like reputation, and they've specifically identified that there's a little bit of a ranking, and it tends to roughly correlate with the regulatory and safety strategies of countries. So they do know US tends to have the highest ranking, followed by the UK, followed by Europe, rest of Europe and Asia. So yes, there is some benefit in expanding to the US. But I would like to remind the startups, especially the ones that come to me, that your budget is limited, and getting FDA approval, getting a reimbursement code, or even reimbursement from major insurers in the US, trying to get lobbying with specialty groups or people to try and speak up and use your product in the US is a lot more expensive and time consuming than you expect. Just for an FDA, even for a straightforward 510K application, you're easily looking at 6 digits and 18 to 24 months if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, that could take 3 to 5 years. And that's not just because you have regulatory approval does not guarantee that you'll have a reimbursement code. And just because you have a reimbursement code doesn't mean you're going to get a reimbursement that you like. In which case, you're looking at a very long time frame, mixed in with things like clinical trials, with back and forth with the FDA. That's a very long timeline you're looking at. And oftentimes startups don't have that capital. So
it sounds like you're leaning more towards the privilege side of the debate, huh?
I'm leaning towards necessity, but I think I'm echoing what a lot of the other panelists say, which is you need to be strategic and you need to have a plan with where you're expanding and why. And I would also do the corollary response, which is Singapore. I practice in Singapore, and there are many startups that approach me about coming into Singapore. And it's very clearly not about the market. Singapore is less than 6 million people. You're not trying to capture a significant market share by launching a product in Singapore. What you are trying to access in Singapore are things like getting regulatory approval, finding KOLs, setting up clinical trials, and using the regional reputation of Singapore to expand to other areas within ASEAN or to other countries within Asia, or accessing the many, many VCs like Cocoon Capital that are available here. In which case, you have to expand intelligently. You need to know why you're going there, why you're going to a country, because it's not just a matter of we're going to expand to the US because we did a calculation and this market share looks great. No, we are expanding to X country, to Y country, to Z country for ABC goals, and this is how we're going to achieve them. In which case, I also would advise any startup founder who's listening, consider other markets that traditionally may not be on your radar, but have lower regulatory hurdles, less competition, better reimbursement. And those countries increasingly include things like South Korea, like the Middle East, and even Africa, where there is a demand for these products that may have been overlooked by MNCs because they have been so focused on the US and Europe markets instead.
Yes, so I agree. So I think there may be some questions from the audience which are more general. Jamie, over to you. Thank you very much to all of the panelists. You can stay online. Jamie shall direct you any questions.
Cool. Unfortunately, we are running out of time here. So I'm going to have to move things on to the next phase of this webinar. But anyway, before we do that, I just want to thank our panelists and Shavari for that very lively discussion. And it seems like there are no easy answers here, but healthcare has never been a simple industry anyway, right? So if there is one conclusion that I can draw, it's the critical importance of thinking very, very, very hard about why and how a company should go global? So while we leave you with that question, let's try to answer a different one that we had at the start of this webinar. So let's revisit this topic, same poll this time. And if you recall, we actually did a poll right at the start and got a perfect 2-to-1 split, with 67% of you believing that yes, going global is actually a necessity and not a privilege. Right now, we are looking at our poll numbers and we are trending dangerously close to having the exact same results. Instead of a 67%, it looks like a 66%. So it seems like, hey, opinions are unchanged. I'm not sure if any of you moved to the other side and someone else moved over to your side, but perhaps we should all be thinking very hard about the whys and the hows, and not so much a question of whether they should or should not. So if you're interested in learning more about Discovery, our platform, as well as updates on other such webinars in the future, you can just scan that QR code and sign up for our newsletter so you can get updates from us based on that.
Yeah.
Once again,
I would
please.
also like to add here, Jamie, that
Yes.
we will continue this discussion on our Discovery platform. We have a forum there where we would love to hear your thoughts and any ideas you may have that you're looking to explore with our community. Do check out our Discovery platform for that.
Sounds good, sounds good. And that about wraps up our webinar for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, once again, thank you for attending this webinar, and to our speakers and panelists for sharing their perspectives this evening. And yeah, that's all from us today. This is Jamie signing off. We will see you at the next one.